Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you here today. We have our guest, Jeff John Roberts, who's going to be talking about his new book, Kings of Crypto. So I want to read off his bio and let him jump on here because we've got a really special guest for you guys here tonight as well. Thank you for supporting Tattered Cover. And we look forward to seeing you at future events as well. Check our events calendar to see where all of those are and the dates and times. So Jeff John Roberts, authors of Kings of Crypto, one startup's quest to take cryptocurrency out of Silicon Valley and onto Wall Street, writes about IP, blockchain, and cybersecurity for Fortune. His work has also appeared in a variety of other outlets, including Businessweek, Reuters, and the New York Times. In 2016, he finished a Knight Bagehot Fellowship in Economics and Business Journalism at Columbia Business School. Roberts covers subjects such as patent reform, blockchain technology, hacking, and privacy in the age of social media. He's an authority on copyright law and other intellectual property issues and is licensed to practice law in New York and Ontario. He's appeared on BBC, CNN, NBC, Cheddar TV, and other outlets to share his perspective on technology and the law. It's my pleasure to welcome Jeff John Roberts today. We're going to have him turn on his camera here and his microphone. Here you are, and we have our special guest is joining us right now. How are you? Here he is. And Brian. Hi, Brian. Welcome.
How's it going?
Good, thank you. My name's Michaela. I'm with Tattered, and you are here with Jeff talking about Kings of Crypto. I'm going to pop out for a little bit so that you two can get the conversation started. And then once they're done, we'll move on to some Q&A. Enjoy, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's thrilled you can join us on a Friday. And Brian, thanks for joining us from DC.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just to start, Brian, you are a lawyer, Coinbase's top lawyer. You've just finished a stint running the country's top banking regulator, but you're also a Colorado native. Is that right?
I am. I grew up in Pueblo.
Neat. Yeah, because it's a funny way to start, but I do want to stick with that for a second, because in covering crypto, you often think it all happens in San Francisco and New York and Switzerland. But in covering the space, I'm impressed how much of it's happened here in Colorado. You know, Ethereum Denver and Shapeshift is a big Colorado company. So I'm just kind of curious your perspective in the landscape. Yep, another one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's, do you think, is Colorado, or is crypto becoming more regional than it used to be?
I don't know. I think what's a little bit more interesting is what are the kind of cultural predictors of who is an adopter, like who sees this as a real thing. And, when I grew up in Colorado in the 70s, Colorado was still a place where there was a sense of Mountain West kind of rugged individualism, leave me alone. It was a little bit of the kind of the Barry Goldwater ethos, not necessarily politically, but culturally. And if you think about what crypto is really about, which is freedom and being far away from control and making your own destiny, that's really kind of what the West was about in the first place. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Denver would be a hotbed of those kind of things. And obviously in the 90s and 2000s, Denver then became a big tech capital as well. But I think even before that, there was a culture there that predicted this.
Yeah, I think that's really well stated. And now you're kind of in the opposite of the free West and rugged individualism, Washington, D.C. And that's one of the themes of my book, is just watching this sort of uncomfortable marriage between D.C. and the crypto community. And you've done a lot to sort of bridge that. But what's the latest from D.C.? Do you think, the city and the federal government is more receptive to crypto than it was a couple of years ago?
I think it's pretty unlikely, actually, that Washington institutionally is ever going to be a fan of crypto, because what Washington's all about is control. Now, the two parties have different visions of how that works, but generally speaking, the permanent, political class in DC, it's not like you have one party that wants a bunch of government control and the other party doesn't want government control. It's just a question of, we want our party to have government control. So, it's the old trope about how Republicans criticize deficits until they're in charge, and then they're happy to run up their own deficits. I think that the issue I've seen, and I've talked to a lot of crypto founders and developers, including some of the most important people in the Colorado community, who have this basic view that, hey, we don't want to engage in policy because policy's bad, and crypto is all about sort of end running those things. Problem with that is if you want that kind of ethos to take hold, then you have to put people in policymaking positions that are willing to get out of the way. So I like to think that kind of my 9 months as controller was getting out of the way. And so I think a lot of your viewers will have heard me say over and over again that, for example, on stable coins, I don't want the government to build a central bank digital currency. I want to let developers build what they're going to build, because developers will respond to incentives and they'll build the cool shit that people want, so let's get out of the way was the message. Or on various other things, I don't want the government to build the payment rails for America. I want people to build networks, and the network that are the fastest and the most useful and everything will win. But that's not really the view of people who are permanent political people. That's a view of somebody who loves the markets. And, I was here for 9 months and I'm on a one-way ticket out of here the day after tomorrow. You need more people like that, I would argue.
Yeah, but you made some differences while you were there. I think the new sort of interpretation that banks can use stablecoins for settlements is pretty big. But then again, in the crypto community, there is this sort of very pro-crypto bias. It's all, everyone thinks just tomorrow it's going to be wonderful. But, I've watched the space long enough that the government can still throw a lot of wrenches. So, do you think that new directive is going to change things, or are the banks going to jump in, or where are we in terms of like big banks coming into crypto?
Well, so let me just first of all say that the point that I was trying to make in this job over the last 9 months was not that, hey, crypto is safe for big banks, so big banks can start doing crypto stuff. That was not what I was getting at. What I was trying to signal was crypto is banking, right? So I was trying to make banking safe for crypto as opposed to making crypto safe for banks. My belief, and for anybody who read my piece on the self-driving banks piece that I had in the Financial Times a couple of days ago, the notion really was that people talk about how we haven't yet found the killer app of crypto, but I think we actually have. The killer app of crypto is the entire financial system. The entire financial system was built around these toll collectors and everything. Eventually that is no longer technologically necessary. And once it's not technologically necessary, the faster, cheaper, better thing will win. So the line I always have when I talk about the role of government and everything is basically, if you believe as I do that crypto has to win because it's just cheaper and more empowering and has features that the fiat economy doesn't have, if you believe that, then government can do one of two things. It can either get out of the way and try and impose some kind of basic framework within which crypto can survive, or it can act like the taxi cab commissions of America did when Uber showed up, and it can try super hard to kill it. But if too many people want something, government can't kill it, no matter how hard it tries. And so that's my belief, is it will win. But I come back to the role of crypto people in policy is you need people in policy roles that are willing to get out of the way. And see, I didn't have a lot of ego and feeling like, oh, I need to control this. I knew that my mission was to clear the path and get out of the way so that people who are innovating and building stuff can do that.
That's an interesting perspective. I want to get to Coinbase in a second, but I want to stick with what you're talking about a little more, because you headed the country's top banking agency, a lot of influence. You made some changes, but there's many other departments and cabinet secretaries. And what I'm curious about is, I've heard some people tell me one of America's biggest strategic assets is the U.S. dollar. It allows the country to borrow cheaply. It's a powerful geopolitical tool, and so because of that, the Pentagon and the Treasury Department, there's people there who are reluctant to kind of open the gates to crypto because crypto is decentralized. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to that because, for, living in the US, I, want the country to succeed. And if that's one of its biggest assets, the power of the greenback, is it really a good idea to, kind of let the crypto, out of the gate and see what happens? So what do you say to those people?
Yeah, I don't buy it. So the advantage that the United States has is not the dollar. The dollar and its primacy in global markets is a historical atavism. It exists for basically one reason, which is we were the only power left standing after World War II, right? But there's no other reason why the dollar would be the global unit of exchange. There aren't enough of us. We're not a big enough country. We're still the richest country by total output, but the increment by which we are the richest country is getting smaller and smaller every year, because there are 4 times as many Chinese and 3 times as many Indians as there are Americans. Maybe it's 5 times and 4 times. There's just an enormous larger number of people in these other economies. What we have in this country, I'm saying have in the present tense, you could debate that, but what we have had in this country that made us different from every place else is we had the best risk-taking culture, right, and the most open markets in the world. That's what allowed us to win World War II, by the way, which led to the dollar, was we were able to have this gigantic industrial apparatus that could have output like nobody's business to go and win the war. So my basic belief is the dollar won't remain in its primary position forever. It can't. Again, there aren't enough of us. When India and China are fully modernized, they will be bigger economies than we are. However, we're a freer economy. We can innovate faster. We can generate value better than they can. And that's why crypto actually matters. It's because it allows us to build features into units of exchange that don't exist in fiat currency. And it allows us to disintermediate and bypass politics, right? That's where we'll win over China if we do win, is because China will have a politicized unit of exchange, the ERMB or the regular RMB. But if we stay true to our principles of freedom, then we can build stuff that's cooler, faster, cheaper, freer, not subject to centralized control. And that's how we'll win. It's not going to be because we're randomly happen to be the country in the 50s that had the unit of exchange.
That's an interesting perspective. And yeah, I want digital currency. I want more crypto, but I don't want what China's unveiling, something that's actually can survey you when you spend. So I think you're right on that point. But let's talk about Coinbase a little bit. I wrote about them because they're sort of the vanguard, the first mainstream company to really bring Bitcoin to millions of people, which I think a lot of people think is great. But there's a lot of hardcore crypto people out there who hate them because they represent centralization. Critics believe Coinbase is too cozy with the government, not your keys, not your coins. And that still is an ideological divide. How do you address that? I mean, do you share some of those concerns about Coinbase? And, is there a risk they'll just become another big bank?
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, a couple of years I spent at Coinbase were like the most fun, happiest time I've ever had in my whole life. So I actually don't share those concerns, but I think I have a different perspective on it. So my take is, first of all, if crypto and Bitcoin in particular is going to get distributed into the economy, somebody has to be the on-ramp to that, because we're not all computer science PhDs. Like, I'm really into this stuff and really interested in it, but I don't know how to actually download the software and start mining Bitcoin as my way of getting Bitcoin. So for me, I need the app. And it's super easy to do that, and that becomes my on-ramp. What I believe about Coinbase in particular, but also a handful of other companies like them, is Coinbase is not going to be forever a place where you go and buy Bitcoin and pay a 2% commission like you would at a broker-dealer or a bank. The purpose of Coinbase is to incubate crypto, and so they will eventually be the platform where developers go to distribute their tokens, where people on-ramp into the crypto economy from the fiat economy, because that will take years or decades to occur. And so much as I've said about banks eventually being nodes on networks, and they're just a way that certain people access the internet, Coinbase will be that too, except it will also provide all kinds of tools for developers and platform opportunities for those kinds of things. But it's sort of like, there's still a category of people in America who get on the internet via AOL. AOL isn't the internet, but it's actually probably good for the internet that handful of old people or whatever have that portal, because they also make the internet more efficient by buying and selling things and putting information out there. So it's just a way of accessing it, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking of innovation at Coinbase, some people said that Coinbase became kind of bureaucratic. People at Coinbase told me the same thing. And then you can also look at like the rise of Binance, which is, incredibly innovative, but also, has more of a cowboy perspective to law and regulation. So do you think, Coinbase got caught flat-footed for a while, got eclipsed by Binance? Is that a result of simply, just the regulations in the US Coinbase had to adhere to, or is that a cultural problem at the company, or a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't say it was a cultural problem at the company. I actually thought the whole time I was there, we moved super fast. I mean, look, I thought it was an amazing management team, and I have really nothing but great things to say about that group of people. But let's face it, I mean, Binance was, founded in China and then was willing to move around from country to country, one step ahead of the law, whereas Coinbase was founded in Silicon Valley out of Y Combinator and, existed in the legal system as we have it today. Probably everybody on this call, myself included, would have a lot of criticisms about the way that legal system affects our asset here, but the law is the law, and nobody wants to go to jail. So at some level, if you're going to have a company in the United States, what you're going to have to do is recognize the regulatory system you exist within and find ways of changing it and people who are willing to change it. That's, again, I think one good thing about me having had this shot here for a little while is it was a moment in time where somebody who knows the law and respects the law and isn't going to break the law can use the levers to change the law. And that's, I think, something that we did a little bit of here over the last little while. But at the end of the day, the US is still the biggest economy in the world. You're still not, I mean, Binance will never be able to be the truly dominant country or company if it can't find a way to exist inside of this system. Now, Coinbase and other companies like it need to figure out Asia as well. That has to come at some point, but we're on a journey here.
Yeah. I know you only have a minute, Brian, but let's stick with Washington for just a little longer. Namely, you ran the OCC, which is not a household name, but it oversees every federal bank in the country. Very powerful.
Hopefully it's a household name now.
Well put, well put. But, and you made some changes there, but the other thing I know about big banks, and I'll cover them closely, they have incredible lobbying power. And I'm wondering, what's going to happen next? Is Coinbase going to sort of keep growing? Is there room for everyone to play nicely together? Or my more cynical take is the big banks will look at Coinbase as a threat, crypto as a threat, and lobby their friends in Washington to crush the industry. The industry had you there for a while, but who knows who your successor is going to be. So
well, look, but I'd also say I'm not dead yet, and these things have a way of cycling back. So there may be yet other things in my future. But what I would say is, if I was predicting the future for companies like Coinbase, and I mean, look, obviously I can't speak for Coinbase, but if I'm going to prognosticate about what will happen, what I think is most likely to happen is as banks decide that their customers want crypto. So as the generation of people who are like crypto native grow up, this is going to be an asset that customers demand. They're going to see it as part of their financial lives, and eventually they might see it as part of their financial infrastructure. It's going to be super hard for the Wells Fargos of the world to adapt to that because the technology innovation inside of banks is almost an oxymoron. And so what they'll do, since they don't know how to build it, is they'll rent it or buy it. And that means that Coinbase, I believe, will become the third-party vendor who's running their custody business, who's providing the crypto backend for various things, much as Paxos is providing that for PayPal, at the moment. So I think that these companies that have built blockchain connectivity, that have actually built tokens and other things, are going to have a hugely influential role on the way that banks' customers interact with crypto. And banks are not going to know how to build that. So customer demand would then dictate that they'll have to access that authority or that ability through the Coinbases of the world.
And perhaps my last question, but that's intriguing if the banks really kind of embrace this. I've got an account at Bank of America and Chase Bank, as I'm sure a lot of people watching do. When do you think I'll be able to have a Bitcoin account at one of those sort of giant old school banks, if ever? Will it be next year? Will it be 5 years? Will it be never?
My guess will be, if I had to guess, there will be banks, and it won't be any of those banks, that will allow you to hold cryptocurrencies in an account that they manage. And I think you'll see that within 2 to 5 years. I don't think you'll see it next year, but I think you'll see it in 2 to 5 years as the market gets bigger. $1 trillion asset classes, can't be ignored. But it won't start with Bank of America and Chase. It'll start with Silvergate and WebBank and MetaBank and banks like that. But listen, in a world where Visa is going to support the USDC stablecoin, where PayPal, will partner with a crypto company, where JP Morgan has partnered with Fidelity to offer crypto custody, you see the trend line here, right? I mean, you already see it here. There's an argument, and honestly, if I'd been in my job longer, we would have said things like this. There's an argument that Bitcoin, vis-a-vis a bank, is no different from like pound sterling or yen at the bank. Right? I mean, we were working on some analysis that sort of suggested that Bitcoin is just another form of foreign exchange. It's a currency that's not issued by the US government, like British pounds. So you can buy British pounds at the bank. Why can't you buy Bitcoin at the bank?
Fascinating. Yeah, I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Anyways, Brian, I understand you have a party to go to, and it's 7:20 in Washington, D.C. Party presumably to celebrate the end of your tenure at the OCC.
My first day of unemployment, man. I can't be more excited.
You got a good weekend in store. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Brian. Look forward to chatting again.
Hey, have a great meeting, and thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to follow up with that. That was such a fascinating conversation, but I would love to turn the attention over to you and to Kings of Crypto specifically, which congratulations on the book, by the way. That's a huge accomplishment, especially during the pandemic here. What I'd love to talk about, you and Brian, and we're obviously having a very thorough, engaging conversation. about cryptocurrency in general, but I want to know about your book, and I want to know, what is it about and what made you want to write about this particular subject? Because it's very interesting how you, I don't know, how you go through it all. But if you could just start with a summary and why you wanted to write this book, that'd be great.
Well, I want to write a book. Let me tell you the story of how it came to happen. A literary agent in New York approached me after I wrote an article for Fortune magazine, which is my day job, and said, "Oh, hey, would you like to turn this into a book?" And I liked writing the article. It's about a venture capital firm and, the VCs and what they did. And, I was going to put a proposal together. I thought, wait a minute, I don't think I can spend a year of my life on this. And so what I learned is, if you're going to write a book, pick something you care about. And I've covered cryptocurrency for a decade, and it's just really interesting. And there's other good crypto books out there. Digital Gold's very good. The Age of Cryptocurrency is very good. But there's sort of the first generation of crypto books. I want to find a way to make this accessible to everyone. And I write for people who read about business. So I wrote it for sort of mainstream business people. And that doesn't mean it has to be boring. A lot of business books, frankly, are boring. So what I decided to do instead was, use Coinbase as a vehicle, because the story of startups is really interesting. They're full of conflict, and it's a huge risk starting a startup. Most of them fail. So the ones that make it have a special grit, and there's often a lot of kind of gossip and backstabbing, and in this case, hacking, which was very fun to write about. So I got to tell the story of crypto while also sort of, telling this, this fun gossipy narrative of what Coinbase did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found it very intriguing. It almost felt like it could be a movie in that way, because of the intrigue that's there. And that's, you and I were talking about my background earlier, being very books and theater based, that this was something I didn't know anything about. And yet you were able to carve this story into it, or really pull the pieces together to build this narrative, so to speak, and not make it boring. And so how did you decide what you wanted to include and what you didn't? What research did you start with to help pull those threads together?
Well, I was lucky in that I did a lot of interviews with the people who were there, because, I've written about companies where they cooperate and where they don't. And for better or worse, Brian Armstrong, the founder and CEO of Coinbase, kind of gave the blessing to his employees and ex-employees to talk to me. He probably regrets it now, but, or I'm not sure if he does or not. He got his face on the cover. So, that was key, and just talking to everyone and sitting down with long coffees. And then you have all this raw material, and you just sort of plucking out the interesting stuff and try to figure out how to make a story about it. Yeah. And then another tip I have is, there's a book called Thinking Like Your Editor. I'd never heard of this book before. And, I'm a writer by trade. And I thought, okay, I know how to write, but writing a book's a whole other thing. You have to figure out how to structure it and pace it. Same way if pretend you're going to sit down and write a TV show. One sense it looks so easy. It's half an hour, but there's a lot goes into it, or a movie. And this, writing a newspaper article is one thing, or, writing a letter is one thing, but writing a book's a whole other thing. So to figure out how to do that, this book called Thinking Like Your Editor was valuable on how this chapter does this, and this does that, and here's where you fill people in, and here's where you, kind of entertain them. So that was, that sort of figured out as I went along, and I had some good editors. So that's very lucky.
Yeah, and that's what a wonderful find and a great recommendation. And I'm curious though, but when did you get bit by the writing bug? Not everybody goes about their life and they're like, I want to write about business. How did that happen for you? What's that background look like?
That's a funny story. I used to be a lawyer, and which is not a popular profession. Then I became a journalist, only to discover the only field people like less than lawyers is journalists. Well, not everyone. But, that's my joke. But anyways, I've always liked writing, and as a lawyer, I had to write a lot. But it's not, it's kind of like writing car manuals all day. Writing a sort of 30-page legal brief is not the most fun. With journalism, you get to sort of tell a new story every day. And so that's how I sort of came to that. But when I wanted to change careers to be a journalist, I discovered it was, the industry's in trouble. Once upon a time, there was lots of fat, well-paid journalists, so they lived the high life. Not lately. So I knew if I was going to go into it, I needed to get a job. And my plan was, I'm going to, do business and then use that to start writing about fun stuff like politics or arts or culture or sports. So I did a course in business journalism, thinking I was going to hate it. And then, as soon as I could, get out of it and write about something cool. But the strangest thing happened in learning to cover business. I just found companies are such interesting stories. The story of Apple, or the story of Nike, or Lululemon, or, Bumble, the dating app which went public today. Those are they're like little countries, and they're full of conflict and ideas and ideologies. So I really like covering companies. They're fascinating stories. The parts of business I still find kind of boring. I mean, I had to take courses in accounting and covering the Federal Reserve, and that's not my cup of tea. I'm glad I know how to do it. But, the story of companies is the story of people, and people who found companies are very interesting people. A lot of them are not very nice. A lot of them are ruthless, but they're still, they've got qualities to build these, what we have today. Like Elon Musk at Tesla, also probably not a very nice guy, but he's built an empire, he's changed the world. So these are the sort of people who start companies, and that's why I like writing about them.
And I think I love that you take it from this human side, you know what I mean? And you look at them as people. And I love that phrase of businesses are little countries, because that's so true. And I'm sure that employees can see it from different sides and see their company as their own little country from it. And I'm curious though about why this company, why, there's so many different startups and so many different stories you could have told, but what drew you to this one specifically? What drew you to Coinbase?
I guess I knew the people, and they were the first to do it. I mean, they were the first to really, just like Apple made, home computers a big thing. Or another example I cite, another great business book is called Shoe Dog. It's by Phil Knight, the guy who started Nike. And now we all take Nike's athletic footwear for granted, but in the 60s and 70s in America, there was the footwear industry didn't exist. There was sure people had shoes, but he created not just a new product but a new culture. And Coinbase was the one, I think, first in the crypto field to figure it out. Of course, there's other crypto companies, some very good ones, and I describe the early ones in my book, but they're the ones who did it. So why did they make it when so many others failed and blew up? And they walked a tightrope wire. They really did, to try to be true to crypto and its ideology. And there's a lot of fanatics out there too in crypto, but they managed to do that while also not getting arrested, which happened to a lot of the other early crypto entrepreneurs. So that's the fun part too. And every time you've got criminals and hacking, it makes for a spicier story. And there's some of those in the Coinbase narrative. So that was a fun thing to talk about.
Absolutely. So what's next? Do you have another, year-long project that you think has gripped you? Are you planning on writing another book, or are you just, I want to sit with my articles for a little while. This one I just gave to the world. We'll wait a little bit.
Yeah, writing a book's a lot harder than it looks, and also
it is.
So I think I'm going to just enjoy. I moved to Colorado. I wrote most of the book in New York, but I moved to Colorado, my new home state. I love it here. So I think I'm going to enjoy what the state has to offer, which is, great skiing. I'm going to go skiing a lot. I'm going to enjoy the lovely, pot and craft beer, and do that for a while longer. And then ask me again at the end of this summer, and I'll see where I am.
Sounds good. I've got lots of brewery recommendations if you ever need them. But I want to turn it over, now that we've talked about that, I want to turn it over. We've already got some people in the chat. We do have some people who had questions for Brian, but if they apply to you, you can answer them. And if not, we can move on to something else.
Well, tell you what, if you ask me those questions, my day job, I cover crypto for Fortune. So I'll get back in touch with Brian. And if I can't answer them, I'll get his answer to them.
Great. So one of them was asking specifically Brian's opinion on the Ripple lawsuit. So maybe your opinion on that?
For those aren't familiar, there's a handful of real mainstream crypto companies in the US, Kraken, Coinbase, Gemini, but Ripple is, I've covered them well, I know them well, and they got sued by the SEC in December for selling securities without a license. A lot of people thought it was quite unfair because, Ripple's really kind of tried to do the right thing. They're buttoned up, they're corporate, the whole bit. So, and I mean, if I had to guess, I don't think Brian loved that lawsuit either, but some people say, you can't sue Bitcoin. That's, that genie's out of the bottle. So they went for who they could get. So they went for Ripple. That's just my take. I suspect Brian agrees, but I'll tell you what, I'll call him after and get a proper answer from him.
Sounds great. Dylan would like to know anything to say about Voyager or Celsius?
That's a little more out there on the sort of crypto companies, and I do my best to keep up on it. I confess I've heard of Voyager, can't remember what they do. Celsius, I can't, and I think your questioner is probably going to be embarrassed by my answer, but tell them to follow up with me and I'll take a better look at them, because the neat thing about crypto space, it moves so fast. I was up on the cutting edge of it, like by the time the book, was submitted, but now I've got some more reading to do, because there's a whole new world of decentralized finance and a whole new generation of companies that will, come to rival Coinbase in a couple of years.
Absolutely. Another question, Wayne says, do you see the crypto markets growing in 2021?
Well, so far they're growing. Like we had $40,000 Bitcoin. I know I've covered the space for years, and it goes up and it crashes. But my favorite quote about Bitcoin is it's like the honey badger. It takes these horrible beatings, it crashes, the government comes after it, and then comes back stronger than ever. The current price levels, I'd be surprised if they hold up. I think we're probably due for another crash. But are we going to go back to the days of $3,000 Bitcoin? No. So I think that's where we are right now. And I think also if you want the bull case, You're seeing Square pile into it. Twitter's CEO loves it. Big companies could come out there and start adding it to their treasuries. And if that keeps happening, I think, yeah, this could really go on for a while.
What role does the government play in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general? I would assume that they're rather negative towards it. That's a bit of a general question, but maybe you could just talk in general about maybe some of the adversity Bitcoin has faced with the government, or some of maybe the support that it's gotten.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the crypto community is rightly frustrated with the government because a lot of people in government don't understand it. They can't even be bothered to understand it. And it doesn't help that, judges, the people who, rule over laws, and a lot of lawmakers don't have to learn new technology because they're in power and they can use the technology they want. I used to work at a federal court where some judges insisted on having their emails printed out because they could. You do that anywhere else, you're not going to be employed for very long. So I think that the sort of technophobia of the government is very frustrating. And also, I think the tendency to accuse Bitcoin as being intrinsically criminal is wrong. A lot of criminals use it. I described that in my book. Still, I think the crypto community, undersells that criminals do use it a lot. But criminals use $100 bills. Criminals use Apple gift cards. So I think slowly, people in government are coming to recognize that this is a technology. You're not going to stop it entirely. However, the government can make, the crypto community's life very miserable. So I think some of the more libertarian fantasies of, not needing the government's not going to go away for better or worse. But neither is Bitcoin. I mean, at this point, it's used everywhere across the world. The network is so strong. I don't think anyone's going to kill Bitcoin.
That's crazy to think about. It's amazing too. Just, I don't know. I think about the technology behind it. My brain wants to melt a little bit, but I think I don't know. Shows ingenuity, and it's fascinating to me. You mentioned a lot of different books that you used to help in your writing process. Do you have any other advice, any other book recommendations for someone wanting to write nonfiction?
Well, read a lot and figure out the books you like. I mean, my inspiration was a guy named Michael Lewis. A lot of you are probably familiar with him. Best known for Moneyball and The Big Short. Those are both movies now. And he took the most obscure fields. Like, you look at The Big Short, that's about mortgage lending, which on its face is the most boring damn thing you can think about. He wrote a thrilling book about it. Baseball statistics. I like baseball, so I liked it no matter what. But also he found that too. Or Flash Boys, which is about high-speed trading, and he was able to go and create compelling narratives that they're making movies out of. So that was my inspiration. So if you're interested in writing business nonfiction, read Michael Lewis. He's so good. Just read a lot. And what I learned from Michael Lewis too is what drives, people like reading about people. I think, Kings of Crypto, it's early yet, but the response has been good. And I think it's because I told the story through people who do things, who have lives, and, who have, conflict. That's how you make these subjects relatable. You have to talk about people, and you have to understand people, humanize them, and then wrap the larger stories of technology and money around that.
I think that's the key for narrative nonfiction in general, right? Like, you're 100% right about Michael Lewis. And as a baseball fan, hopefully when the Rockies play, we'll get to go see them and stuff like that again. But you might have to switch your teams there. We're very purple here, but now that you've moved. But
don't worry, I'm not a Yankees fan. I'm not a Yankees fan, so
then that's acceptable. You're welcome here. Sorry. Anyway, another great question is, was there anything that you wanted to include in the book that you didn't get to that you might be able to share with us?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'll have to be careful with my sources.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I have a couple things. If we're having beers in person somewhere, I'll tell you some more of the gossip that's not in there. But since this is going to be on YouTube forever, I promise people I wouldn't betray some of these secrets, especially not in a forum like this. But the answer is yes. But sorry, I can't tell you the full dirt.
That almost makes it even cooler in the sense of like, ooh, that we know that there's more. It makes the book almost more intriguing to know there's even stories behind it here as well. So
yeah, and if you read between the lines, you can probably guess a couple of them. But yeah, I can't. Unfortunately, can't put the juiciest stuff in the book or on this broadcast.
No, totally fair. Thank you for being honest as well. What did this book teach you? Either about yourself as a writer or any interesting facts you want to share?
I think as anyone who's tried to write out there, people will know it can be a very lonely thing. So it's important to have friends, people to talk to. What I did, I hired a friend of mine who's also a journalist, a former Bloomberg guy, and paid him a little bit to read my drafts, mostly so I had someone to talk to while doing it. The other thing I discovered too is momentum, because a thing as big as a book, it's like, oh my God, some days I'm like, the idea of vacuuming, the floor just seems too much, so the idea of getting up and writing a book is just way too much. But the secret I found was momentum. If I did it every day, it was actually fun, and sort of I had to schedule what I had to do. I was under a time deadline too. The other thing about writing a book, it's like you have to, here's an advance, here's some money, get it in by now. And if you don't, we're going to take the advance back, which is pretty good motivator. So I didn't want to lose the money that had been given to me. But yeah, the big thing is momentum, because if you step away from it for too long, it suddenly becomes in your mind like huge and daunting, and oh my God, how can I do this? And also, the other thing I'd like to mention is there's real ups and downs. I think every writer, and I talked to other people writing books, and that was very helpful too, is on a good day, you're like, wow, look at me, I'm writing a book, aren't I cool? And then, the next day you're writing, and like, my God, this is awful. No one's going to read this. I hate this. Everyone's going to hate this. So it's this kind of bipolar existence. So it's important to talk to other people and try to kind of keep an even keel and just write every damn day. I took one day off in my big push of writing to go fishing, and because Colorado's got a lot of great places to go fishing, but otherwise it's a grind, and I just push myself, and it was done.
In that same vein, then what would you say is the biggest difference between writing for a magazine or writing articles than to writing your book? Because you mentioned a couple different things here, but I think they're looking for like a specific, like, what's the biggest difference in your opinion?
Just scale. I mean, structure, it applies to everything. If I'm going to write a news story, I know what I'm doing. That's a very simple structure. If I'm going to write a magazine feature, that's more complicated, but you sort of know where you're going. And for a book, that was really key. I really had an outline. I broke it into 3 parts, and I broke it into chapters and broke up those chapters. So it's just a bigger version of what I do already. But that's so critical, because, sometimes it'll happen to me. It doesn't happen to me much anymore, but if you're writing a longer feature piece, and you don't know where you're going, you just find yourself stuck in the same paragraph for hours at a time. So that's why you really need to know where you're going next. And if I find myself stuck and I'm writing the same sentence over and over, generally the problem is either I'm really tired, or more often I've made a mistake in the structure. I don't know where I'm going, because it should be sort of a link of chains that take you forward and forward. And that's what, that's sort of what I figured out for the book. You really need a tight outline, or else, even more so than with the magazine feature, you're going to be in deep trouble if you're writing if you don't know where you're going next.
Yeah, it's very keen advice, and I bet it helps with research too, knowing what you got to fill in, and being able to tell the story that way. Where do you recommend people start if they want to learn more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Go buy some. That's the easiest thing. I think, you see the Bitcoin prices like $30,000. You can buy 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. So you can take $5 and go play around. That's what I would do. And then there's some of these other cryptocurrencies. I mean, for the love of God, do not put your life savings in this stuff. Do not put even 20% of your savings in, but increasingly people are saying put 5% of your wealth into it. So if you have a little bit, it's going to be kind of fun too. And once, learn the basics, get it, it demystifies it, you like it and you want to learn more, just keep trying it. I mean, I'm not naturally good with technology. I'm not one of those people who can fix your router in a second or knows all the new gadgets, but I have to cover it and I have to force myself to understand it. And the way you do that is you just kind of keep trying it. And that's what I've done with crypto too. There's things like hardware wallets where you can store it on your own keys, and so I went out and got some of those just to figure it out. I'm not that hardcore, and also I only own a very tiny bit of Bitcoin, because as a journalist, I can't have a conflict of interest. So, my writing is not supposed to influence the price of any of the stuff, but, try it. It's fun. And, talk to other people about it. I've met so many cool people in this. I mean, some of them are totally nuts, but a lot of really intelligent people, a lot of passionate people. And the neat thing about Bitcoin is the intersection of so many things: economics and politics and culture and even history. So there's sort of like a space for everyone in there. Although I do say in the book, I mean, I think what crypto's got to get better at is diversity. I think it can be a hostile environment to women, for people of color and things like that. I don't think that's because people who like Bitcoin are sexist or racist, but often, when you're hanging out with a bunch of people who are just like you are, it can be easy to kind of, assume the whole world looks that way and thinks that way. So, I think that's the more people come into crypto, the better. And I think it's important people who like crypto to be welcoming to everyone.
I think that's a huge point that we need to address, especially with the state of our world right now and the fact that more people are becoming aware of those different perspectives. And I think that's vital to it. I'd love it if you could, we're a little bit out of questions, but there was one thing you mentioned in there that I want to ask a little bit about is you mentioned how cryptocurrency Bitcoin was the intersection of so many different things. And I'm curious, because we've talked a little bit about the politics and we've talked a little bit about the economics, but how does culture and history fit into it?
Well, I mean, I think history, look at the history of money, because, some of the skeptics are like, why use Bitcoin? This stuff isn't worth anything. It's not backed anything, blah, blah, blah. Look at the history of money. We've used like clamshells and then, bars of gold and then like pieces of paper given out by banks. So, I think it's just a new evolution, and the currency is always changing how it's distributed, how it's made. So I think that's the historical part of it. Culturally, though, it's it's interesting what it grew out of. Some of the people, I think it's called I described it in the book, though. It's a cypherpunk culture in California. These were sort of hardcore computer programmers who also were quite libertarian, wanted to create a new form of money. Very cool. That part of it's neat. And then you've got like hardcore people, including like Colorado's Eric Voorhees, who is involved in. He's a guy who runs a company called Shapeshift, early influential crypto figure, and he was mixed up in the Free State movement, which is all libertarians should move to New Hampshire until they're a critical mass and be able to basically implement a libertarian government. That's not my cup of tea, but sort of these cultures are really interesting. And then you've got things like Dogecoin, with the Shiba Inu meme. It's just so much of the memes are fun. Crypto Twitter can be kind of catty and ridiculous and vicious, but a lot of it's just really fun, and the creativity and stuff like that, I just think is so neat. The memes people come up with, or like money printer go burr. That's the one that's going around right now after the Federal Reserve keeps printing money. And they have a good point. There's a lot of great graphics about that. So, I think, explore it a little bit. Don't be intimidated. I'm not saying go out and, advocate for Bitcoin and put all your life savings in it, but try it. It's just really fun. It's not going to go away. And, it's just part of our economy and culture now.
And I think that's a perfect place to end on, in the sense that, this book and you and Brian's visit, really kind of inspire people to just learn something new about and trying something that they've never touched before. I know that before I read this, I had no idea. I was like, oh, it's that thing. It's electronic money. But this taught me so much more, and it makes it interesting. And you never know what you're going to learn with it. Like the fact that you just said pick Bitcoin Twitter. I'm like, oh, of course there's a Bitcoin Twitter. That's so great. So I want to thank you for your time. And thank you to Brian again. We were so grateful to have him as our special guest for this here. I want to give you a chance, Jeff, to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and any other last minute thoughts that you want to give our viewers before we close out tonight.
Yeah, I think 45 minutes of Zoom is exactly enough. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for watching. I appreciate your support. And also want to thank Tattered Cover. Independent bookstores are wonderful. I worked one all through high school. Speaking of culture, they're kind of a pillar of our community. So please buy my book. If I'm pretty sure you'll like it. If you hate it, tell me and I'll try to change your mind. And please buy it at Tattered Cover, because they're a great local bookstore, a great local institution. You can find me on Twitter at Jeff John Roberts, and my DMs are open if anyone wants to chat crypto. I'm around. When the pandemic lifts, I'll be back in Denver and Boulder, and would love to grab a beer. If anyone's passing through Leadville, where I live, come see me too. I always like to chat some crypto. So thank you, everyone.
We'll have to get you to come to the store and sign some stock for us when the pandemic lifts. But Jeff, thank you again for your time with this. I want to just remind everybody, thank you so much for shopping locally. Really, the fact that we're able to do events like this and host wonderful authors like Jeff and special guests like Brian is because of you supporting local independent bookstores and shopping locally. It's a huge deal for us. We wouldn't be here without it. Tattered Cover wouldn't have made it to its 50th year. That's our 50th anniversary this year without it. So thank you guys for that. You can check out Kings of Crypto at tatteredcover.com and order your copy today, either online or which is our website's open 24/7, or in one of our 4 locations in the Denver metro area. So Jeff, if you want to just hang on for a bit after I close out this live stream here. My name's McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore. Thank you guys again for joining us. Stay safe and happy reading. Bye, everyone.